Hello everyone, today we are going to be starting a series where we're going to take a deep dive into the Canon EOS-R. It is Canon's first full-frame mirrorless camera. So let's start by looking at all the buttons on the outside that the camera has, and then we'll take a deep dive into the menus, and then finally we'll look at some of the setups when you're shooting video and when you're shooting photos. Alright, so the camera comes as a body, and sometimes you can buy it just as the body, or you can buy it with a kit lens like this one. And so the first thing that you need to do is to stick your lens onto your camera, and you find on the front, on the left, you have the lens release button, and this is the same button that you press to remove the cap. All you do is you press down and then you twist anti-clockwise and you remove. Now, one thing you need to learn about removing and putting lenses is that you need to make sure that you don't get anything falling onto your sensor and you don't get any dirt in the sensor area. And so you need to practice taking off your lens quickly and putting it back on, or putting another lens on quickly, and try and avoid having your camera facing up like this, because things can drop onto it. So when you take the cap off, have your camera facing down as you take your other lens, and all you do is you remove the cap. Let me put this down. Just remove the cap. And if you're new to these kinds of cameras, you'll find that there's a mark on the camera body in red, and there's also a mark on the lens that's also in red, and all you need to do is to match those two up, and then you twist until it clicks into place and locks firmly. What I'm going to do now is connect my camera via HDMI to this Atomos, because I want to record the menus as I show you different things. Now, might as well look at the side of the camera where I'm going to connect my HDMI to see what we have. The first thing we have at the top is called your remote control input. This is where you connect an external wired remote, or shutter release. It's called a shutter release, and you can operate your camera remotely via that shutter release. If you're taking things like long exposure, or you want to take photos without shaking the camera, you can connect a cabled remote right there. The next flap covers your microphone and your headphone inputs. So that's where you connect your microphone, external microphone. The camera has an internal microphone, but we always recommend that when you're recording video, to get the best quality, you need to have an external microphone, and this is where you connect it with an 1/8" stereo jack. And then below that you have your headphone input, and we always recommend that when you're recording, make sure you are monitoring your audio. The next flap covers the USB-C connector, and this is where you can connect a USB cable to transfer data into your computer, but you can also actually charge your battery via USB while it's in the camera. And your next port is what we're going to use to connect to the Atomos. That's your HDMI out. And this Canon has a mini HDMI out. It doesn't have a full HDMI out. And so when you're getting a cable for it, make sure you either have an adapter like what I have here, or you actually have a full HDMI to mini HDMI cable to use. So I'm going to connect this HDMI out here so that I can see the menus and record what I'm doing as I show you. So the first thing you're going to do obviously is switch your camera on, and the on button is here on the left. You just switch it to the on position and your camera switches on. On the top is your hot shoe, and your hot shoe is where you're going to connect your speed light or your flash trigger. And then to the right of that you have an LCD panel where you can actually see a quick view of your settings from the top. The next button we're going to be looking at is our mode button. The mode button also serves as the rear dial, so when you move it like this, it serves as a dial. When you press on the top, it serves as the mode button. This button lets you select between photo mode and video mode. When you press it down, you enter a menu that shows you what shooting mode you're in, and when you press the info button at the back of the camera, you can toggle between your video mode and your photo mode. Once you're in your shooting mode, video or photo, you can now use the cross keys, this D-pad at the back, to move between the different shooting modes. The next button we want to look at is the movie shooting button, which is the little button with a red dot in the middle, and this is what you use to start and stop video recording when the camera is in video mode. Now just in front of that is our main dial. So this is our front dial. I talked about the rear one, but this is the main one, and depending on what shooting mode you are in, this button adjusts key settings like shutter speed, aperture or ISO, and it just depends what you're shooting in. So if I'm in my photo mode, for example, and I move this front dial, you can see that it's changing my shutter speed. And I use the rear dial, it will change my aperture. But like I said, depending on what else you're doing, these buttons can actually change other things as well. The next button right in front of this front dial is called the multifunction button, or MFN. The multifunction button is a customizable button that provides quick access to frequently used settings like ISO, drive mode, or white balance, and things like that. So when you press it, you get access to 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 settings, but all you do is you press it, and you can use the front dial to change the settings of whatever is selected, and you can move the rear dial to move between the different items. So you have exposure compensation right there, and then you have white balance, and then you have one shot or servo, that's for focus, and then you have self timer mode, and you have ISO. Right at the front you have your shutter button, and that's what you use when you're in photo mode to take pictures. Sometimes I see beginners just pressing the shutter to take the photo, but the way it works is you press it halfway. So when you press it halfway, it turns green, and when it turns green, it means it is now focused, and then you can press it all the way to take the picture. Let's go back to the top. Towards the right again, there's a small button written lock. The lock button is also called the multifunction lock button, and this button prevents accidental changes to settings that you've made. So when I press it, you can see the screen reads controls locked, and so you can't do anything when that is locked. So to unlock, I just press it again and the controls are unlocked. Let's go to the rear of the camera, where we find cross keys that you can move left, right, and up and down. And then you have the Q or set button. It's actually a way to quickly access a lot of settings. So if I press the Q button, you can see I have all those settings that I can change. I can use the up and down arrows to go between AF method, AF operation, drive mode, metering mode, and so on. So you can quickly access different settings and change them using the Q or set button. Now, what comes up on your screen really depends on what mode you are in. Going up to the top, you have the AF stop button. This is written AF on, and this is used to start autofocus. So remember, I mentioned that when you are shooting in photo mode, I can half press the shutter to activate autofocus, but you can also use this AF on button to activate autofocus independent of the shutter. So I can press this and it focuses, and then I use the shutter to take the photo, and this is called back button focusing. And a lot of people like shooting that way, to use this back button to focus and then use the front button to just take the shot, so that the shutter is not linked to the focus. Another thing we need to look at is the viewfinder sensor. This is found just below the viewfinder, and it's a little sensor that can be quite annoying because what it does is it automatically switches the display between the viewfinder, that's this, and your LCD screen when it detects that you are looking into the viewfinder. The problem is when you're trying to shoot, you can easily activate it and your LCD screen, your main screen, will keep going on and off. So there's a way to actually go into the menu and switch that off, and that's what I do. The info button at the back, this button toggles between different displays on your screen, and so depending on what I want to do and what I want to change or what I want to see, I can toggle between all these different views. If you want to change these settings right here, you can go to this setting and then you press Q to activate the different settings. You can then move between the different settings using your cross keys and change what you need to change from this menu. On the top left side you can see the menu button, and it does obviously what it says. When you press it, you go into your main menu, and when you are in your main menu, you can press the info button to move between the main tabs in the menu, or you can use the cross keys to move between the sub menus inside. Now a lot of people like to do this physically, but you can actually just use the touch screen to move between the different things. When you press the menu again, you exit. At the bottom of the camera you have these two icons that are in blue. One is your playback button, and that displays the photos and videos you've captured, and you can press that to get into that mode and then use the cross keys to move between your photos and videos. And next to it is the trash icon, and that's what you use to actually delete. Even though one thing I would recommend is never delete photos or videos while you are in the process of shooting. Do that in post-production because it's so easy to delete the wrong pictures or video when you're shooting. So don't delete anything while you're shooting. Just make sure you have a big enough memory card so that you can keep all your mistakes and then get rid of them in post-production. The trash icon is also used to fully format your card. So if I go into my menu and I press info and go to this fourth tab, you can see there it says format card, and you can do what is called a low level format when the icon is checked. When I press the trash button, it unchecks it. Now when it's unchecked, your camera formats the card, but when it's checked, it does a more thorough job of formatting your card. The next item we want to look at is just next to the back button focus button or the AF on button, and it's a little star, and this is your auto exposure lock or flash exposure lock button. What this does is that it locks your exposure so that it doesn't change, or flash exposure setting so that you have more consistent results over multiple shots. Below that you get your AF point index magnify reduce button. That's a mouthful, but basically depending on which mode you're in, it can adjust your autofocus location. When you are shooting, you see this box with little boxes around it, and that tells you where your camera is going to autofocus. And so when you press this button, you are able to change where that autofocus is going to be. So you press the button and then you use the keys at the back to change where your focus is going to be. But it can also magnify the images when you're playing back for detailed review, and you can also hold this button and use the quick control dial to zoom in and out. On the side you have the place where you put your SD cards. It only has one slot for SD cards, which is not ideal. Quick thing about SD cards, we'll talk about this later in the series as well, but it takes SD, SDHC and SDXC cards. Whenever you're using a card for the first time, always ensure the card is formatted in the camera. Don't do it in your computer, do it in the camera so that it functions properly. The other button we want to look at is the touch bar, and it's located to the right of your viewfinder. This is another customizable function and it's touch sensitive. The way the touch bar works is either by swiping, by covering the button, or by touching either the left or the right arrow. When I cover the whole touch bar for 1 second, the menu comes up for me to be able to assign different functions to it. So that comes up and you can see user customization, image browsing, and all those other functions. So when I click set on user customization, you can see the 3 functions that are currently assigned to my touch bar. The first one is ISO, and so when I move my thumb across the touch bar, I can increase or decrease my ISO. The left of the touch bar is set to show peaking, focus peaking, and then to the right of the touch bar it's set to jump to ISO 100. So that's it. That's all the buttons of the Canon EOS-R, and understanding the layout and functionality of these buttons and menu options will help you operate this camera efficiently and creatively.